Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of the Blacklist Season 1, Episode 2. As you guys know, we are rewatching this summer the first season. We are doing these videos on Fridays, kind of breaking down what we're seeing and kind of speculating and thinking a little bit about Season 10 along the way.
Thank you to everyone who's been watching along with us. It was really nice to see sort of this reaction from you guys, and you guys are enjoying these videos, and we're really enjoying talking to you guys about these videos and about these episodes. So thank you so much.
Guess what we're doing, everybody, now? We going freelancing. We're
All
talking
right.
about the freelancer who of course returns later on down the road. So this is a fun episode. There's so many different things, moving parts to get into, but of course, hit that subscribe button if you guys are enjoying these. So we don't want you guys to miss any of the other ones, and that's just the best way that it's there. You will have reminders, especially if you hit that notification bell, that we are here every single week to talk about this show.
Yeah, the Blacklist isn't coming back until 2023, but
Yeah.
we are still going to be here every single Friday with you guys throughout the rest of the year so that we can all still kind of enjoy some Blacklist content. Also, follow us over on Instagram. That would mean a lot to us. We'd
Yeah.
really appreciate that a lot.
Okay, so the foundation for the freelancer here is pretty simple. Like, this is the first episode after the pilot, so with that in mind, the writers are kind of clearly establishing, okay, this is exactly the sort of show that you're gonna see, where we're gonna get these blacklisters and we're gonna try to mix them up with some personal stuff for Liz, for Reddington, for sort of everybody else along the way.
Yeah, and this is really where they're starting to get into what are they really going to do about Reddington?
Yeah.
Like the different sort of pushes and pulls with Cooper. And, he really thinks that Reddington could be a gold mine of information of all these different people that they just didn't know about or didn't know how to catch or whatever, that they could use him to bring in a lot of people. And the other side is like, nah, we're just going to arrest him. And once he brings us to the freelancer, we're just going to arrest him too. Like, we just want to have the nice big collar and then parade Reddington around to be like, look at what we did.
It's funny to watch this now because I think there's sort of this notion that, like, over time Reddington has really, like, corrupted people and they think a little bit more in terms of the gray area. But it's sort of like Cooper, even in episode 2 of this show, he is like, I want to work with this criminal. I want to do this thing that's not necessarily like the quote unquote morally purest thing to do.
Cooper has always lived in the gray area, which I think is why he's legit my favorite character. There's just so many things about him that make it really hard for me watching the show to pin down where he's actually going to land on something, because he surprises me all the time.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what makes him so fun to watch. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of fun things to watch within this episode, especially since, we've got like this international mission with Reddington and Liz where he like tries to get to know her better. They're sort of figuring out their dynamics.
Yeah, watching them at the restaurant was very interesting. We had this sort of, oh, let's go have dinner, wear a nice dress. If anybody asks, you're my girlfriend. I was like, okay, now I'm starting to remember why I was kind of like, okay, listen, it's James Spader. He has chemistry with a floor lamp. You can put him in anything, and there's just like this romantic chemistry with him. He is James Spader. If you've been watching him as long as I have, I mean, I was, a teenager in the 80s when he was really around and really like hot on the scene.
Yeah.
Every single role he was in, it didn't matter what he was doing. There was just chemistry with him and everyone, like everyone. And so when I first saw him on the show with Liz, I was like, there's a romantic chemistry here with him. There just is. That's what it felt like to me. I've seen in the comments that, there's some of you that are like, no, straight away. He was a parent. And after she says, no, I'm not going to pose as your girlfriend, he's like, all right, my daughter then. So they really did lay that out very early, that it could be a couple of different options.
I think they wanted it to be ambiguous in the early going. I think they wanted almost everything with this show to be ambiguous in the early going because I think they didn't know if anything was going to work. And I think what they decided to do because of that was we're just going to throw a lot of darts against the wall and sort of see what sticks, what people are the most interested in. And while I know John Bokenkamp had a little bit of a plan, a lot of times if you're a showrunner, you got to leave yourself sort of amenable to be able to change some things here and there along the way. And I think he and Eisentrath really made sure that they could do that.
Yeah, I this whole restaurant scene was, I think, really important to a lot of stuff because one of the things that Reddington asked her to do is to profile him.
Yeah.
And she profiled him wrong to a lot of stuff that we know about Reddington from watching the show. Of course, watching it in episode 2, we may have been like, is she right? Is she wrong? We don't know. He didn't really confirm anything. But one of the major missteps she had in her profile of him is she was just like, oh, you're a loner. You don't trust anyone. You won't get close to anyone. Strangers are your closest friends. And I'm like, Dembe, Brimley, Marvin, the sisters, Mr. Kaplan. The list goes on of people that he truly was deeply involved with before meeting Liz and during knowing Liz. Like, it's just kind of like, this is so off base.
It's really off base. This is an interesting question, I think, for the commenters. It's like, was the show trying to show that Liz is not good at this, that Reddington is like that hard to read, or was this the writers not really knowing where Reddington stood with a lot of this sort of stuff? Because it's so interesting that, like, even in seasons, like, very many years later, because we meet Ilya much later on down the road and we find out, oh, this is one of Reddington's closest friends. So it's like they're still hitting that theme home many, many years into this show. So I'm really curious if this is sort of a developmental thing or if this is like, okay, Liz, you ain't that good at this right now, which, by the way, in general, the show over the years, they just completely forget about Liz as a profiler. Like, this is just not something that they tend to bring up at all.
The writing for Liz in this first season is so good. Like, they really dove into a lot of threads that they just like poof kind of went away. Like, this episode also really focused on her being very adamant that she did not want to have biological children.
Yeah.
She was adopted. She wanted to adopt. She wanted to pay for it. It was something that was a deep connection for her, something that she was not wavering on. She was in the adoption process. It was extremely important to her. Then later on, the actress became pregnant and they decided to actually write that into the show and just forget everything that was important to her and in her as Liz, of someone who's just like, no, I'm not having kids. I've made that decision. And, typically when people, men, women, whoever, make that decision that they don't want kids, there's no accidents. You don't get pregnant by accident. You make the decision to not have children and you take the precautions to make sure that that doesn't happen. So it was just sort of like, that all went out the window. And it's great that we have Agnes, but Agnes could have been adopted. There are just not a lot of shows out there besides like This Is Us that focus on either people who have been adopted and sort of some of the struggles that they go through, or people who are adopting people and sort of what they feel, what the motivations are behind it. I was just like, oh man, this was a really, really 10 out of 10 storyline that just got dropped.
Since since this is a rewatch and we can kind of look at things bigger picture, I think it's fun to have a lot of like big discussions about the overall arc of this show, because one of the things that I really think about a lot when it comes to like this storyline, the adoption storyline, everything that was going on with Liz as a profiler is just sort of like, as this show goes along, like what's going on in Megan Boone's head? Like, eventually she leaves after season 8. So is she getting frustrated with the direction of her character at a certain point? Because I think what happens here is that obviously, like you said earlier, Spader is the star of this show. He's the big name. He's got like this larger than life character that is incredible. And I think almost every viewer will tell you that they watch this show because of Reddington. And so it feels like a little bit over time, this focus just becomes more and more about Reddington. And I get that, but I think it comes a lot at the expense of Liz, where they just sort of took into their heads, a lot of people being like, I don't really like Liz. And so they were just like, okay, well, we're not going to really write this character that consistently anymore, or put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, by the end, she only was like this kind of one-note character, which was, I need answers, I need answers, I need answers. The sort of adoption and all these other facets of profiler, like all these different things. Like they were building a really solid character here with a lot of interesting points that don't really get flushed out on TV very often. And that's why when she first came on the scene, I know not everybody loves Megan Boone. I really enjoyed her. I thought that this character was great. I thought she was great with the character. She had great chemistry with James Spader. Like this was a nice fit. And then it was just like the character just unraveled into one thing on one track. So if that's the reason she left, we don't know.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Well, since we are talking big picture here, this is something that I don't know we could say in a lot of other videos, because I don't think the wig does not age well. And the reason I'm saying this is everybody, was talking about the wig not being a great wig back when it aired and all that. I get all that. But the thing I'm really thinking about is, like, if this season aired in 2022, like, are they going to make Megan wear that wig? And, like, the whole story behind all of this was that her hair was pretty short at the time that she did the first season, and they had, like, this look in mind for the character. It's just like, why not just have Liz have short hair? Because it's like the wig is distracting. It's just, it's not good. And I just don't understand what the point was with it.
Or take some of the money from this giant budget you have, where you have all these sweeping scenes and train crashes and helicopters and ships, and buy a really good wig. There are some beautiful wigs out there that look real, and they could have just put that money into that.
Yeah, like, I'm not trying to harp on it. It's just, look, it's distracting that it's just so not good, and it's so obviously not good through a lot of this. But anyway, I'm done with the wig. I won't talk about the wig anymore.
Okay, let's talk about Dembe. Dembe actually is in this episode, and so is Luli, who is a character that wasn't around for very long. But I found it, again, very interesting that we had this sort of profile from Liz, where she's like, oh, strangers are your best friends because you won't even get close. And then the minute they come out the car, he's hugging and kissing Dembe. He's hugging and, like, on the lips kissing Luli. I was just like, okay. But then it was very interesting that he then turned to Wrestler after he kissed her on the lips passionately and was just like, just so you know, she hates men. And for all of you out there that think that there's this, Reddington is actually Katarina, that was probably the very first moment that they touched on that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting bit of evidence. And this is sort of where I still don't believe that Reddington is Katarina. However, this is why, I've never wanted to disparage people who believe this. Like, there's clearly a lot of evidence that is planted through the entirety of this show. Like, I think there's some things that don't line up, that don't make sense as well. But if you were to point to this specific thing, I would be like, okay, you know what? I get it. I understand it. It's almost funny that, like, Louie's not around very much anymore. It's like, this is the one defining memory of Louie from this show, really.
The one thing I also really like about these first two episodes is how, like, perceptive and how good Wrestler is at his job. This is something that later on in later seasons 7, 8, 9 that we've talked about here on the channel a lot. Just the idea that the task force is so bumbling and they're always like too late, messing it up, something's not right. We saw here in the first two episodes that Wrestler's right on the money about a lot of stuff, including we saw them taking these lie detector tests. And Reddington was asked this question: have you had any personal contact with Liz before meeting her, the other day? The answer is no. So he's we know he's not telling the truth already. But even though he passes that, Wrestler's very fast to just be like, he's lying.
We all know at this point, we've all seen enough crime shows or watched enough true crime documentaries to know that, polygraph tests don't always work, aren't always admissible. It's like wrestler is really good at this. And I think another part of this that gets lost later on is that like he was chasing Reddington so much longer before even the events of the pilot. And, they had some sort of relationship that was kind of cat and mouse and approach that we kind of see play out a little bit. And it's just sort of like, I wonder what happened to a lot of these people over the course of the show. Is it just like the Blacklist just gets tired? They don't know what to do with certain people anymore. They all get kind of stuck in a rut because, yeah, there's so much more they could do with Donald than what they're actually doing right now.
I really like the first sort of interaction with Wrestler and Dembe when they're at that party and Dembe's having a beer and he's like giving him crap for drinking. I was like, how far you two have come.
I know.
Look at you guys working together on the FBI now.
It's just crazy how far Dembe comes as well, because he's like silent in this episode. And, we know almost nothing. And here he is now, where I think he's a top 5 character on this show. And he's someone who I just love to see. But, okay, let's talk Freelancer since we're like 16 minutes into this. It's really funny this episode is called The Freelancer. He's not actually in it all that much.
No, I mean, we have this character that, they're going after, and it's a very personal person that they're going after. We all know what she was doing. We don't need to repeat that here. But Reddington is going after her specifically because this person hurt Dembe and had done some stuff to Dembe. So again, this sort of profile of strangers are your closest friends, like it's so wrong and it's so out of there. And that's why I think even just in this particular episode that they're trying to show us that Liz is very new at this.
Yeah.
So she's not going to be seasoned at this. She is not going to be that great at this. Yeah. And Reddington has been hiding who he is personally for so long to people that he doesn't really know. So he's been able to trick her as well into thinking that he's somebody that he's not. I mean, he's gone through all of this to basically get revenge for Dembe.
It's a perfect sort of testament to a lot of Blacklist cases are, where it's sort of like, Reddington gives the task force something. They go and do this. Eventually, they're able to put a bad person behind bars, or there's some bad people who end up dying. But in the end, he's doing the whole thing for like something that is personal for him, for a larger agenda that he is trying to achieve. Like this episode, from that sense, it sets the tone really well for the sort of show that we're going to get. And I think one of the fun things about watching it is always, how is Reddington going to hoodwink everybody this time? And somehow we're not going to be mad at him for it.
Are we going to see the Freelancer coming back in season 10? Because he's still alive. He's just in jail.
It's a really interesting question, because I think if the writers are thinking about, okay, who are notable blacklisters at this point who are still out there, who, Wu Jing could get in contact with in some shape or form. Like, he's obviously going to be on the list. Like, I remember sort of looking at this episode and being like, this is a guy who like stages like mass tragic events, and he was like ranked number 145 or something crazy. It's like, why is he not ranked higher? Shouldn't he be more dangerous than this? But I think in general, like we saw him again in season 8, and he was a part of sort of Liz's larger plot at that point. Like, I think they could bring him back again. I think the big thing at this point is just like, we all know how dangerous the Freelancer is. The fact that he's already been roped back in on this show already. It's like, I know police officers in the world of the Blacklist can be just a little bit incompetent here or there, but aren't you going to protect this guy with every security officer you have so that people don't break him out?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to actually see him again. I think once Reddington figures out about the Marvin list and that Wu Jing has it, and that people are starting to be informed of Reddington being an informant behind everything, I think people who are in jail are unlikely to be getting out because they're going to know that they need to protect their asset.
Yeah, and like even if you're gonna do something like this, it has to be done like so sparingly, especially because Wu Jing was in prison. So it's like
Mhm.
we're gonna go from releasing Wu Jing to then just like, oh, we're gonna release the Freelancer almost right after that. It's like not every episode of season 10 can be Prison Break.
Okay, let's talk about the Tom stuff
All right, all
because
right.
we had this whole discussion going on between Reddington and Liz where he's kind of like, okay, so you found the box and you found all the
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, so you have a couple options. Your option is option one, you can go to the police and they are going to arrest him.
Yeah.
Option two, you can confront him and guess what he's going to say? I don't know what you're talking about. It's not mine.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a crappy option as well. Or option three, you can put it back in the floor, put down some more carpet,
Yeah.
and then just continue to watch and profile him yourself, which is what she decides to do. And it's like, even when she's putting this box back in the floor
Yeah.
and she's again like going over the symbol, how do you not know that that is your scar? It's 2 episodes. They have pushed this scar that she is so intimately like knowledgeable about the shape of it, the feel of it, how she got it. And you're going to see something that looks exactly like your scar and you're going to be like, put it back on the floor.
It's funny.
I don't know what this is.
Like,
she can't be this incompetent.
This never occurred to me in like any other time that I've watched this episode until like, this very time. And I think it's because we're on the other side of season 8 now where I was watching that scene with that box. It's just like, how did she not get this? Like, what? I mean, is it just like so obvious that it doesn't pop in her head? It's sort of like when we're looking for like some spices in like the cupboard and the spice that we want is like right in front of us and we're just like digging all behind it.
She may okay, maybe we should give her a pass. Maybe the issue is just like she's learning too much and too much is happening at one time. You've got, her husband is maybe someone else. Her husband has been stabbed in their house.
Yeah.
Reddington is now here. He knows all this background. It's our first day. There just might be too much going on that she's not thinking clearly.
Here is the other thing that I randomly sort of got a glimpse of in this episode is just, we were seeing Tom sort of being carted around. He is mild-mannered teacher Tom, so he's got on the glasses and all that. But look at this dude's arm muscles. This dude is built way too much for a teacher. Like, come on. Like, where does he have time to hit the gym while he's, like, caring for all of these kids and planning their future?
Listen, you can be fit and still like doing other stuff. I mean, like, look at Dr. Mike. He's another YouTuber. He is fit. And I think he actually has done some like celebrity boxing or whatever, but he's a doctor. Like, there's no reason for him to be quite this fit. So maybe, people just want to, feel good, look good, take care of the body. I don't know. I ain't fit, so I don't know.
I'm not either. This is why I don't trust you, Tom. You're a teacher and you're too fit for your job. No, okay, I'm just being ridiculous now. But this episode is very, very good. I don't think it's as strong as the pilot, but that's just because the pilot is like so amazing and it's one of the better pilots that we've had. Mm-hmm. The funny thing now, though, next episode that we're getting into, Wu Jing, we are getting there finally. I guess I shouldn't say finally. It's only episode 3.
No, I'm really excited for this episode. I mean, it's been years since I've seen this episode, so I'm really curious now that he's back for season 10. Let's see what's going on here.
All right. Well, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We don't want you guys to miss that. We really appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts in the comments, having fun with us throughout this rewatch. Hopefully, it tides us all over. And we will see you here next time.